I was literally just brought this job. I had a customer that wants to make a beach cart out of this Gorilla cart and this old Razor four-wheeler, I guess it is. So we're gonna mate these two up by cutting the front off, taking the back wheels off the Gorilla cart and welding them together. And I'll throw a picture up there if I can find an example of one on this internet. I guess this is a pretty popular project for an electric beach cart. So let's go. We'll start tearing it apart and getting it welded together. It is so hot. It is unbelievable. All right. Let's get this back axle off. I got that back axle laying over there off, so we're gonna cut the front of this four-wheeler next. We'll get to, I think he wants this lowered a bunch, so I'm going to push this down here, I guess. Let's loosen that bolt. Here I'm just taking this shock bolt out and gonna reposition this to lower the overall height of the cart. If you left it at the height, it would be at a really weird angle. So what I'm doing is I'm drilling holes lower down on this bracket, and when you do that, it will raise the back tires up so the cart sits level. What's crazy is this metal on this thing was really hard. Normally this step bit drill that I use eats through most anything, but whatever metal they used to make this cart was more difficult than normal. But I ended up getting through it, and I drill one hole on this side, one hole on the other. I slide the shock down and I rebolt it, and I can't remember how much suspension sag I gained. It was 1 or 2 inches. Here I'm just measuring to make sure that the holes are even with each other on both sides. This shock had a bushing in it, so if you drill these holes at an angle, it'll be a lot more difficult to get the bolt through it and to mount the shock. But overall, I got it done. You can see I'm pushing pretty hard here. I got it done, and it mounted up pretty good, and the cart ended up sitting very close to level, so came out exactly how I wanted it to. All right, I've got the shock relocated a little bit lower to raise the back axle up a little bit so it sits lower. And now we're going to cut off the front steering axle and kind of get this thing going here, get this mocked up a little bit. All right, here I'm using the big DeWalt grinder with a benchmark cutoff wheel to nip the front of this quad off. You don't need the front wheels for this project because you use the front wheels for the Gorilla cart. It just makes setting up the steering a little bit easier, I think. You're using the cart steering instead of the four-wheeler steering. If you use the four-wheeler steering, you'd have to use the tie rods and make some type of pivot system to be able to turn. And this ended up being just the easier way. The only difference with this is you have a different set of tires, but you can get the back tires of the cart onto this fairly easy. I wanted to leave as much of the ATV frame available so I could weld the Gorilla cart to it, because this ATV frame on this Razor four-wheeler was actually really stout. I was actually pretty impressed with how well it was made. Really, it was pretty strong stuff. Got the front axle cut off. I threw it over there because I don't care. It's freaking hot out. I'll probably maybe scavenge some pieces off of that to reinforce this thing. We will see. All right, I've got it upside down on this cart. Mount this one here. All right, I'm gonna throw a couple tacks on this thing. I marked it, but I want to sand it and mark it again. If you do any kind of metal work, you normally have more than one grinder, and that is definitely the case in my situation. I have this Hercules grinder that works pretty awesome. The batteries don't last as long, but I love it. It's actually a lighter grinder to use, and I often use it first over the DeWalt. I've got this thing mocked up and centered, so I'm going to put a couple tacks in here to hold it in place and fully weld it once I get everything else mocked up. Big fat beads. That was a little more than a tack, but all right, I've got the ATV frame pretty much tacked into place. The tacks were a little bit bigger, but now I want to make this front brace to just give the cart a little bit more support. The Gorilla cart is actually made really, really light duty compared to the four-wheeler. So I added this middle brace in just to give it a little bit more strength and make sure that the cart didn't flex in any of the directions. All right, we've got most of it tacked in. I just need to get a brace from here to here. So let's find a piece of tubing that will work there. All right, I got the front brace right here. I'm gonna notch it all up and make it fit. All right, I'm making the front brace for the ATV frame, and I'm actually using the DeWalt grinder here. It's got a little bit more oomph than the Harbor Freight one. All right, got the front brace going, so let's get this tacked in at least. All right, I've got that front brace all built and in place, and I'm using the MIG welder here to get it all welded up. Now, this piece of metal I use is probably way thicker than what is really needed for this cart, but it's what I had on hand, and it's what I went with. And usually that thicker metal is a lot easier to weld than the thinner stuff. It doesn't blow through as much. I actually have two MIG welders here. This is the Lincoln I'm using with a Yes Welder whip on it. The Lincoln whip was like wicked expensive, so I went with this Yes Welder one, which is like 79 bucks and works awesome. So got this all welded up, and this thing is pretty stout. It definitely is not going to go anywhere, and the customer had mentioned that his kids will probably ride in it or ride on it, so I wanted to make sure that when he was using it with his kids that there was not going to be any issue with the frame breaking or anything coming apart, or I didn't want any issues to it rise at all. So a little bit overbuilt, never hurt anybody. I think I got it all. Do a little cleanup with a flap disc and call that good probably. All right, the customer wanted some steering stops. I just got an email yesterday. So we're gonna add steering stops right here with these pieces of tube. You could have put a bar here and had them come up and do it, but I think I'm just gonna put like a triangle type steering stop, kind of just like that. And we're just doing that to make it a little bit less costly for the customer. They want to save some money on this, so I'm using a little bit of scrap from the front of this four-wheeler, which is this. It came off the front subframe, and instead of fabbing up a whole cross brace situation right here, we'll just come off of this, and it should be plenty strong enough. So let's get that. I've already cut these pieces of tubing. I know roughly how long it's going to be, and we'll tack this up and get it mocked in place to find out, you know, how exactly where it needs to line up to make it stop correctly. All right, let's go see what this looks like. So that looks good. right, let's tack that in and double check the fitment. Looks like I got it. We'll weld that in. I cap these, fully weld them in, and then trim it up to make it a little bit nicer, and we'll weld it onto the beach cart here. Probably don't need any more welding than that. 2 big tacks. I'm gonna tack it on the back side here. Looks good. Now I'm gonna sand it down, make it look pretty. All right, I've got this thing mocked in place, and we're gonna weld it up. Make sure that is good. Good. Alrighty. You can see those. Stop it from getting into the battery tray there. Good to go. All right, this is the electric cart here. It came out pretty cool. The customer will now take it and put all the pieces back in and be ready to go. Let me know if you have any questions.